Hi, this time I wanted to talk about some work we've been doing to, so I'm creating a webcomic, and by that I'm creating using Unity with VRoid Studio characters, but I've got no sound. I've just got, I am using characters, I've got speech bubbles to show what they say. I'm using a format called Web Stories where you can sort of tap on the left and right edge to proceed through the content, and so it's a whole series of short clips. But one of the things, because I'm not doing sound just to keep my effort down, to be completely honest. I mean, it'd be nice to have voice actors and all that sort of stuff, but it's just too much work. So I'm using these speech bubbles. But if you look at this frame, come back again, you notice that his mouth is not moving and her mouth is not moving, and it doesn't look as good. I tried to automate, have an animation script to move the mouse around a bit, but I need to do it so many times on every single page, and having exactly the same clip every single time gets a bit obvious after a while. So I tried to come up with a better solution, which I have automated using a custom timeline. And what I was going to do is to run through how I use it and how I wrote the code. So, and I supply in the show notes, there's a link to a gist that's got all of the source code that I used here. You might need to hack it and adjust it for your own use. It's not designed to be generic, but and even if it's just a useful example of how to do a custom timeline, I thought it might be interesting to some people to share. So this is the idea of the story, and I'm just trying to get, and here's another example. I'm going to go through some issues with this one of he's trying to have a nice big grin and talk at the same time. So we're going to look at some of these examples. So let's go into Unity. I'm using the sequences package, which is fairly new from Unity. And what it allows you to do is to have a nested tree of what they call sequences, and each sequence has got a timeline associated with it. And with a single button click, you can basically create a new sequence, which just reduces the effort to set up a new timeline. So what I'm going to do is, here was the other scene. If I bring up the game window over here on the side, what we've got here is you can see that the boy's mouth, his name is Sam, is moving a lot more. And then over here, it's not very clear, but her mouth is moving a little bit as well. And the way I've done that is by creating these new track types using my own script. And let me scroll up. I'm just trying to work out how to add another script. Okay, so it's called a talking mouth animation track, and it's off the bottom of the screen. I'm not going to stress too much about that. So I've got a couple already, and then what I do over here is I right click and I add a talking clip. If I bring that up in the inspector, I can type in some text like isn't it nice weather today? And what that does is the script, I've got some automatic conversion to Viseme. This is really crude, by the way. This is not true lip sync automation, but I don't need to get it accurate. I just need to get it distinct enough and make it look somewhat believable. So these are the actual Visemes, and you'll notice it's doing things like it's throwing away consonants. The spaces will mean it will go back to a closed mouth. An I will make an I sound, and it's got a couple of letters, and I'll show you the script later. It's pretty crude, but it's good enough. And so what it means, if I come over here, you can see his mouth is moving as I play through. Now I've also got it so I can adjust the length of the clip, and that will make it talk fast. And so I've got complete control over how long that's going to take, which makes it easier to line up with other movements and clips and control. So I can adjust the length, I can add new clips. I've got two here. I've got one here for Sam and the other one for Mrs. B, who's the name of the old lady. And each have got their own sort of talking tracks, so I can sort of line them up with respect to each other so they're not talking at the same time. So that's the overall effect. Now, there is another one. If I jump forward to scenes to over here, this one was interesting because if you remember, he was smiling and so his mouth was already in a position, but I still wanted to give some indication of talking. And the way I did that is if I bring up the inspector, I added this weight setting, because if I set the weight to full strength, his mouth goes weird because I'm sort of overloading too many different blend shapes at the same time, and it's just looked terrible sort of look. And so my solution to that was to have this weight value, and so his mouth doesn't work very much in this particular case, but it's just still enough to give an idea of he's talking while it's going through. So that's the end result. So what I thought I'd have a look through is some of the code for doing this, and yeah, as I said, the show notes have got a link to a gist, which is just got a URL to where you can download and look at the code directly. But let's jump into it, and I've got the files here open already. So the where's the scripts? So I've got a close off some of these windows. Apologies, should have been a bit cleaner beforehand. Here we go, the scripts. And so I've got this talking track. I've got an editor. Does it? I didn't need a new one. For some reason, it's decided to start up a new copy for me. I've already got it open up here. So okay, so the talking clip editor is the first one. Talking clip editor. So what the clip editor is, and look at the code carefully off in the show notes. I copied it from something else and basically pruned it back. You need to be able to edit. Clips don't really do very much. It does most of the work for me because it uses the inspector window and also for all the details. But it basically tries to find the director, and the only thing it's actually doing is changing the highlight color. And so you might notice that when the cursor, if you see the little blue bar down here, it's appearing and disappearing as I go in and outside the range. And that's actually the only thing this clip editor is doing. And there's a line there. It's sort of saying, well, take the highlight color and make it stronger. And that's it. It's really pretty well the only thing. And so it had to find the timeline editor. It had to make sure it was within the bounds of the clip duration. And if so, it made it brighter and return those options. So there's a whole lot of other methods you can do in here, but that's just an example of how simple you can get, because actually you can get rid of all of these details if you want, and you just have nothing in the class. But you do need, I think you do need your own class to so it doesn't get confused. The track, so over in the other one is the track editor, which is this script, and again it doesn't do very much. You can do things like change the height of the bar. Frankly, I didn't even need this. This could be a completely empty method, but I've just left it in there as a reminder in case I come back later. So you can see that the editor is not that hard for a default editing track. You can actually get rid of pretty well everything inside it. You just got to create it. What you have to do though is these special little annotations to say, look, this is a talking track asset. This is the thing that I edit. So if we come over, they go in the runtime directory. So there's three things that go in the runtime directory. The first one is a talking track asset we're going to have a look at. Talking track asset. Again, it's got pretty well nothing in it. I've picked a color for the track. It's got the link off to the actual what the clip type is. I've also told it the binding type. So the binding type is what drops in over here. And so I've told it what component. I need a game object that's got this special component attached. This component is how I control the mouth positions. And we'll go off and have a look at that in a moment. Cool. And so next we have a clip. So what does a clip look like? The clip's got a fair bit of code in it, and I'm not going to show you all of the code, but there's also, just before I get into there, there's the behavior, which is here. And so what the behavior does is it actually executes a code, and the clip is the one that's worrying about just dealing with the clip. So, okay, probably didn't mean anything, but you can type in the text, which we'll go over and have a look in Inspector on a clip. This is the text field. I've got a checkbox to say whether automatically convert it to Viseme, so you can get in there and override it, and you've got this weight. So there's the text, there's the Visemes, the Boolean flag to say whether to convert it, normally just leave it on. There's the Visemes, it's a multiple line, save it, and the weight. So they're the four public fields. I'm not going to go through all of this code, but this is, you've got to create a behavior to actually do the work at runtime, and this one's creating it, and you just create it with this graph, and it's a whole lot of magic, and you just copy and paste, and it works. Isn't that terrible? Here is when you're setting and updating the field. It's saying, well, if that checkbox boolean was true, call this other function, and then just copy the Visemes across into the behavior. So this is where the behavior is the thing that's actually going to do the work. But because I showed the Visemes down here to allow you to edit them by hand, I have the code that does a really crude job of turning a string, which is this text box, into a list of Visemes. And basically it's looking for certain, like AY, well, that's sort of like an A, like say, and so it's just picking the Viseme shapes. If it's AW, it's like an OR, so it's closer to a U sort of mouth position, and so forth. And it just goes through a whole lot of different ones. And then if it doesn't recognize it, it adds a space, if it wasn't already a space. C and K, crudely, like you see the word nice, well, it's actually going to put it through to, it's looking for CH, CK. It's really crude. It's not going to get it correct all the time, but it's just doing a little bit of common Viseme, very crude lip sync algorithm to come up with this. And you can get in, you can turn the checkbox off and do it by hand. But nothing's actually done anything. It's just computed the Visemes, and that's where the behavior comes in. The behavior is the runtime thing that actually does the work. Oh, and there's a link to a video that I used to work out some of this stuff. I found it really useful. Okay, so then the actual behavior's got the Visemes and the weight. That's all it needed to know. I've got a class of weights. I use that down below, but process frame is the important function, and it gets passed at runtime various information which you can work out how far you are into the clip using the getTime, the playable getTime function. You can work out the duration of the clip. There's a whole heap of other functions, of course. And so the Viseme duration then is the clip duration minus all the Visemes. And what this is doing is trying to work out is every Viseme is going to be given the same length. And so it's going to go from a closed mouth to the first Viseme, to the second Viseme, and then to the last one. But the last one's always meant to be a closed mouth, and so it's just always going to close it at the end. So it's just trying to work out how long to spend on each Viseme, basically. So it works out a duration for each Viseme. It then takes the total length of the clip, start time, and this is just some magic sort of stuff to try and work out which Viseme, because it's always going to be animating between two Visemes and doing a sort of a lerp blend, if you like. And so it's trying to work out which is the base Viseme and which is the following Viseme. So this is the base Viseme and this is the next one, unless it's at the end, in which case it just uses the last one, so it doesn't add one to the Viseme index. So it's just trying to work out the two Visemes. It then turns out into a set of weights, which is AEIOU, and so it's just trying to work out the relative weights. I'll show you that in a moment. And then I've got my own script here. So this is just trying to blend between the two durations, just a little bit of magic, sort of just maths. You can just copy it and use it, or dig into it if you really want to understand. But here it sets the strength of all the different Visemes, and then it tells it, oh, by the way, I've just updated you, which updates the puppet. If you pause, I turn everything off. Here are the weights for the A, E, I, O, U, and an S. So an S, I use a combination of two Visemes. A C is really more like a K, and then everything off. And so I've just used these 5 vowel sounds to come up with weights, and then to actually that character to Viseme function is just map the characters to one of these weights from above. So A is, the first one is full strength A, E, the first one is A, E, I, O, U, and so it's just blending a few. I found that the I, for example, most of the time didn't really open the mouth enough so you could actually see it, and so I used a bit of a bit of E and I combined to give a better eye looking shape. So that's the actual sort of like the runtime of using it. As I said, I'm not going to explain all the code, but I gave you hopefully a little bit of a feel of how that actually fits together. So then you get into the blend shape clips, which I'm not going to go into huge detail. This particular one is actually pretty simple. It's just got properties for these different things. I have a what's called a blend shape script which controls all the blend shapes. I just found it easier by having one for the vowels for the talk to combine, that this other one goes off looking for the vowels one and merges it in. The animation, it takes over properties of a component, and so you can't have two things controlling the same set of properties. So if I come over to a character, like Sam, inspector, close it down, I've got a blend shape. Here we go. Here we've got the blend shape clip. It's got all of them, but I had problems because if I controlled the mouth and everything at the same time, sometimes the things conflicted. So I just created a separate object. Oops, sorry. I can't just click on it. I created a separate object for the vowel shapes, and that allows me to combine. And this other component looks for this one and merges them in, and so I can have one thing animating these properties and another script animating those properties, and they don't conflict with each other. And that's the only reason I separated them out. And so in the script, most of the time, all it's doing is copying across this weight into a blend shape accumulation function, which came out of the VRM code. I didn't write all this blend shape stuff. I'm just reusing it out of the VRM component, which is for controlling VRM files, which is a format for virtual reality characters that sort of people are agreeing to, such as VRoid Studio. But for the vowels, saying, well, if it's nothing, I'm just going to use my own property. Otherwise, I'm going to use the max of the vowel, or that which is a blend shape clip vowels value, or my own value. So it just picks the max. I could do a clever merging of them, but I just decided to just use whatever the max of the two was. Cool. I'm not going to go through and describe this particular script. I don't think it's sort of out of scope. But the end result is, if I get to the game object, you can see that now I can get a little bit more movement. If I bring up the other one before, if you remember, see the mouth wasn't moving at all, didn't look as good, and now I get a little bit of movement because of the weight and the tracking. So hopefully that just gave a little bit of an overview of a script, how to create your own timeline. You can add them down the bottom here, and so you can do custom behaviors and fancy things if you need to automate something. Every single page I've got pretty well. I've got text, and I just found getting in there, and now I can slide this around. I can adjust the length. The speech bubble, I just copy the same text. This is another one that I've got, which is actually a storyboard to actually put the speech bubbles over the top of the page. And so I've just got the same text, so I just copy and paste it into both. This one displays a sort of bubble, a speech bubble shape, and then just draws some text over the top of it. I basically copied and hacked the storyboard from Unity that they supply, and just so I could get this image and drop this text over the top in a particular font, which is just a comic looking font. So that's how I get these speech bubbles over the top. It's a static image with some text drawn over the top. But it seems to work quite well, so I just copy and paste the text into both, and now I've got a bit of animation coming through for the mouth. And it saves me quite a bit of time. And to me, that's really what I write scripts for. I'm not doing games, I'm using scripts to automate the development process of the creation process. This is content, just so I can get on with the story rather than having to mess around with things. Hopefully once I've got enough of these scripts, I won't have to write any more code.